Welcome to the Midnight Meeple, episode number 2. I want you to sit down on that sofa and make yourself comfortable. No, not that sofa. Sorry. If you could just cover the ash up with a blanket or just remove the cigarette. Actually, just sit on the floor. It sounds like it's going to be easiest. Now, I know we haven't done an episode of the Midnight Meeple in a while, and that's because I want you to treat it like a special thing, something that doesn't appear very often, like hemorrhoids, or when your grandma comes to visit and she brings you hard candy, and then you look at your mother and you say, "Mom, is Grandma going to die soon?" Now, to those of you that don't know, the Midnight Meeple is a podcast that's recorded after dark when all the haunts are closed and all you can do is be by your lonesome self in your dark room. And that's completely fine. But one other game that I've played recently kind of encapsulates that loneliness and isolation and coldness, and that's the Dead of Winter, The Long Night. What an appropriate name. So here's the thing about Dead of Winter, The Long Night. It is a standalone expansion to the Dead of Winter, which we have reviewed previously on our YouTube channel, and we reviewed it very positively because it seemed to tell a story, and that story emerges through gameplay mechanics and sometimes through cards. It's a nice combination of both. But it was interesting to return to Dead of Winter after a couple of years of having actually played it. The Long Night gave me a reason to return to it. So here's a couple of things. If you're poor like me and often skulk around corners looking for change, then you're not necessarily pleased about the fact that The Long Night is a standalone expansion, meaning you have to buy the base game again to get the expansion, and you have to pay the price of the base game. And because we have left the European Union, now the base game is going to be even more expensive than the previous one. What a shame, really. But you do get a lot of new things. You get an all-new set of motley crew of characters, which are all shiny and peppy and don't at all seem like they belong in the Long Night like I do. They should have really put me in the game, I think. That would have made a lot more sense. The hobo. I suppose they had the mall Santa already, so it's just be doing the same character all over again. You get 3 modules in Dead of Winter, The Long Night, and they are of differing sizes. One of them's a pretty small module. It simply adds improvements, and you get these tokens that you get to put on 4 cards that you deal out randomly at the start of the game, and they could be wonderful things like fireplace is perfect for a hobo again, or an outhouse. And once they have enough improvement tokens, you can build those things and they will add positive things to your camp. But it doesn't really add a lot of difference into the gameplay. It's something that's just very minor and just kind of there, and it's fine, and it's nice that it's there because it gives you that sort of sense of like, oh, we're actually improving our camp and things are getting better as we're all dying. And you often die from zombies still, even though the second module is the bandit module. I'm not going to be talking about the third module, which is the Raxon module, which adds all kinds of kooky elements like frozen zombies or hobo zombies. I like those. And because we haven't played it yet, and we're going to save that for the video, but we have played the bandits module, and I have to say it wasn't necessarily what I expected. I expected the bandits module to add a sense of danger from the bandits. You know, they'll be raiding our camp or they'll be shooting us, but they don't really do any of that. They simply appear in locations, and one by one, if they're not dead yet, they'll start looting cards from the locations, which you can then go to the bandit camp and retrieve via either searching or attacking. And searching is low risk, low reward, whereas attacking is high risk, high reward. So if you're already badly, you could get a lot of wounds or die immediately. Or if you roll really well, you'll get a lot of items that you can pilfer through the bandit camp deck and take anything you want because it's face up. And that's kind of nice. but it works. It's solid, but I wanted something from Dead of Winter, The Long Night, that if it were to add bandits, then, there is a certain sense of threat. And the only way they pose threat, they don't ever attack you. They simply count as an extra player standing in a location for the purposes of adding zombies. So when they're on a location, more zombies appear there. And sometimes if you just leave them alone, the zombies will overwhelm them and take care of them. And then you can go in with your regular lighter and fuel combo and just blow them all up. But yeah, there's more things to The Long Night. There's new barricades which explode, taking everything out, and there's new items in the items deck. You still have, food and fuel and medicine, and all those basic items are the same. Some of them have different artwork, like the food is now a cornflakes package called Blood Flakes or something like that. But yeah, no, it was interesting to play it again. It was interesting to explore it again. But the one thing that struck me about it most, I think, is that how the game felt dated, even though it's only a couple of years old. We really enjoyed it when we played it. And now all of a sudden, I didn't find myself that engaged with it. And I think it's because over the last couple of years, we had so many new advancements in terms of storytelling in board games like Time Stories and Pandemic Legacy and Above and Below and all these things and new things coming out as well. First Martians, very excited about what stories that game is going to tell us. So yeah, I think no final decision on The Long Night because we haven't played one of the main modules in the game and we haven't explored yet everything we could explore with it, and maybe that one game was just a fluke. But it was one game that made me feel lukewarm about coming back to that game. Continuing with the theme of winter, we're going to be talking about Ice School, which is a kids game. Kids, right? They grow up so fast. I mean, my son's older than me now, and it's just not easy, but you have to keep them entertained, and I found that Ice School is the one thing that does keep them actually quite entertained. So let me tell you about how I tried to handle the game first. And you have when you open the box, it's got a box inside the box, and there's another box inside that box. It just seems like it never ends, and you keep pulling them out, and they're all still there, and you eventually pull them all out, and then the instruction manual tells you how to build the school out of those boxes, and you have like an obstacle course, effectively, and you have these little plastic pawn things that you put down, and they're like Subudio men, but they're penguins. And you have to flick the penguins. And let me tell you, the first time I flicked the penguin, I really, really hurt my finger because I flicked it very hard, and I realized very quickly, don't flick the penguin hard. That's what my mother used to say all the time. And yeah, but once you kind of get your head around it, you can do all kinds of trick shots with the penguins. Like you can make them zip around other penguins or walls or whatever. You do kind of like a 180 effectively, and then you can make them jump over walls by flicking them on the head, and it's kind of neat. But you realize very quickly that if you want to be good at that game, you will have to do a lot of flicking. Now, the game itself, there isn't very much of a game. One player plays as the hall monitor, whilst the other penguins are trying to get out of their classroom and through certain doors to pick up fish, and you redeem fish, or you redeem as the hall monitor, however many penguins you got, you redeem them for cards that you draw off the top of the deck, and they're victory points, and each card is either a 1 or a 2 or a 3, and it's completely random as what you're going to get. But then there's a little bit this nice addition of balancing, where if you get 2 1s, you can spend them for an extra flick, which could be really good actually, and that was nice. And even though you do spend them, you still retain the points, so that's that's a nice little addition. And yeah, I wasn't obviously that enamored with Ice Cool because I don't normally play kids games. But I tell you, who was enamored with Ice Cool? My friend's 5-year-old. After I played the game, I decided that it would be hard for me to make a video about it. So I thought I would include it in a podcast instead. And it was my friend's 5-year-old's birthday. So I thought, you know what? This is probably the best birthday present I can come up with. And then he was really excited when he got it. He immediately started building the school however he wanted to build it. So I sat down with him and I helped him kind of build it the way it shows in the booklet. And then we started flicking penguins at each other. And it was surprisingly a lot of fun. And he was kind of getting his head around all the trick shots and stuff like that, but he couldn't quite master them because he's too young, and that's fine, you know. He could still enjoy himself because simply the flicking action is great, and you can see it's something that if his dad was into playing as well, which I assume he hopefully will be, then it's something they can get out together, and as time goes by, he will become better and better at it, and you know, eventually he'll be able to land those trick shots and whatnot. But I tell you what was most cool about Ice Cool is just that when he was done playing the game, when he got bored of playing the game, because kids get bored of games pretty fast, they want to move on to their lightsaber or Lego bulldozer or whatever, and he just started playing with the rooms themselves, the boxes that you get in the box. He just started, you know, kind of sliding them across the floor, which seemed very peculiar to me, but he was having a whale of a time, and I think that's the most important part. The components in Ice Cool are so nice and colorful, and children really enjoy nice, colorful things, it seems, and they enjoy the tactile element of it being a thing you build, and then you can kind of, I don't know, have fun with it in that way. That's it, really. That's all I have to say about Ice Cool. Except that maybe I wish I was a kid again. Okay, cats, it's time for a little bit of storytelling. See, a while ago, the big city drew me with its bright neon lights and dark, gloomy alleyways, so I decided to pay it a visit, if you will, and one of the things that happened was eventually I got bored of the city, as everyone does, and I decided to retreat to the train station for a cigarette, is where all the cool people gather. If you've never been to the train station in the big city, you know that you're missing out. And whilst I was there, I was sitting down just outside it and trying to light my cigarette, but my lighter, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't ignite the flame. And I looked around me, and there was a man sitting next to me, and he was quite shabby, and he clearly hadn't showered in a couple of days. His hands were very grimy, and he looked worn and tired. So I asked him, I said, "Hey buddy, do you have a lighter?" And he reached into his coat pocket, and that's when I noticed that in one of his other hands he was holding a beer and drinking it, and he reached out into his coat pocket and he pulled out a lighter and he gave it to me, and he said, "If you need it, just keep it." And I said, no, that's okay. I'll manage on my own. I'll be fine. And you meet a lot of these people out in the city, you know, people who try to take advantage of you by pretending that they're vulnerable and in need of help. But there was something about this man that made me feel like he was genuine. And I asked him his name later, and he said his name was Aaron. And I knew at that time that Aaron, he needed someone to listen to him. He needed someone to hear his grievances and his tribulations. So I sat there and I said, "How long have you been out here, Aaron?" And he said, a while now, because basically, to make the long story short, Aaron told me that his wife had cheated on him, and he used to be an upstanding kind of guy, and he had a job in the city, and car and kids and all of that. And it wasn't just that his wife cheated on him, it's just that he found out how much he cheated on him, and it broke him, and he, in his own words, decided to check out. And at that point, I knew, well, there's always two sides to a story, and you don't know the other side. You're just hearing one side, and you could hear anything. But I knew at that time that Aaron was in a funk, and he had to get out of it. You see, I am often in a funk, but all I need to do is to have a shower, and Aaron was in a totally different kind of funk. So I sat there and I listened to him, and I gave him some advice, and eventually I asked him, "Do you have anywhere to go, Aaron? Do you have any friends?" And he said, "No. She was my only friend." And then I asked him if he had any parents, and he said, "Yeah, I have a mother in Australia, which is very far away, and I have a dad in Yorkshire, but I don't talk to my dad anymore." So I knew he didn't have anywhere to go. I had a feeling that things were going to be alright for Aaron eventually, that this was a momentary lapse of reason. So I took him to a Starbucks, and I bought him a cup of Joe's, and I had a cup myself, and we carried on talking, and eventually we started talking about other things, which was good, because when his mind is moving on, that's where he's not so much worried anymore. And so we're having a cup of Joe's, and he says, "So what do you do?" So, and I told him, and I said, amongst other things, I also like to review board games. And he's like, he's got the usual question of like, "Oh, what, Monopoly?" And I said, "Well, no," and it just as luck would have it, I had a copy of Beyond Baker Street in my backpack. You see, I like to carry board games with me, because small ones, because you never know, and so I showed him. We didn't really play a game, but I kind of showed him, and he was very interested in it. I didn't think it was the right time or place, but yeah, we left it there, and I went home, and I kept thinking about Aaron. I kept thinking, when things are going to be fine for him. I hope that he remembers me, and I hope that maybe he remembers the board game that I showed him, even though there's the faintest chance of that happening. But not for a selfish reason, not because I want him to, see how amazing this hobby is, but because board games bring a lot of happiness to my life, and I know it brings a lot of happiness to your lives as well. So I hope that one day he finds something that is different and that brings happiness to his life as well. Talking of the city, we have two board games that I want to talk about that will pit against each other, like some sort of snake versus anaconda kind of deal, and they're called Quadropolis and Between Two Cities, and they're very, very similar games in their concept, and not just in their concept, but in the mechanisms that they have. You see, in Quadropolis, you're building a city out of tiles, and those tiles, depending on how you place them, whether they're next to each other, certain tiles want to be next to each other, like a park and a residential building, or shipyards want to be in a line, because the bigger the shipyard, the better, and you build a 4x4 city, and then you score points for it. Whereas in Between Two Cities, you also build a 4x4 city out of tiles, and again, the tiles, whether next to each other or apart or in a certain pattern, that matters for points. And the way you play the game is very similar as well, because what you do is you draft those city tiles, and the way you draft is the real differing element between the two games. And there's one more that's pretty important, and I'll get to that just a little bit. But the way you draft in Quadropolis is all the tiles are publicly visible to all the players, and you need to place these architect tokens that are numbered from 1 to 4, and depending on where you place them on the drafting board, that's you count down the numbers, and that's which tile you'll take. And then you'll place a pawn there where the tile was, and that pawn will block certain architect placements for other players, which is a neat mechanic, I think, and it kind of gives you a visible outlook into what everyone is doing. Whereas in Between Two Cities, you have the more regular draft where you have some tiles to yourself. You'll pick a couple and then you'll pass along the others to the left or the right, depending on which round it is. And I think what's really different about those two games is that in Between Two Cities, you're not just building one city, you're building two cities. And the lowest scoring city out of those two cities will be your scoring city, basically, your final score. But you're building each city with one person to your left and to your right. And I like Quadropolis because it gives you that quick sense of drafting and building a nice city, and there's a little narrative to it, although it's fairly abstract. And in both games, actually, the theme is fairly abstract, but I like that there's a clear strategy that emerges behind what other players are doing, and you can evaluate what other players are doing, and then you can go in a different direction, or you can be reassured that you've picked the right path and follow that path. Whereas in Between Two Cities, you get that same feeling, but you also get that strange feeling of cooperation, which is great. Not many games do that. You get to cooperate with other players and talk with them. You get to vocalize your strategies and have them reaffirmed or denied. But then at the end of the day, you get to have that same satisfactory feeling of whether your strategy is the best one or not, because only one person wins, no matter whether you're cooperating with someone or not. Well, you have to you're forced into talking to people, which I think is great. If you don't like talking to people, I would say get Quadropolis, because in that way you will never ever have to talk to anyone again. But if you like talking to people, and I assume most of you do, because board gaming is a social activity, then Between Two Cities, for me, is a superior game. It's actually an incredibly fun game. It works great with 3 players or with 7 players, which is the minimum and maximum player count, and any number in between, which is rare. Not many games do that just work with any kind of number. And then I imagine Between Two Cities could work even with more players, but then they'd have to print more tiles and it wouldn't make sense. The one advantage that Quadropolis has is that you don't just have to build a 4x4 city. You can go into the expert mode and build a 5x5 city, and it adds more tiles. And I feel like Quadropolis has that expandability element where expansions for it are definitely going to come out, and it's a very pretty game as well, with translucent plastic pieces. Don't get me wrong, I really like the plastic pieces. No, the wooden pieces in Between Two Cities. You have these little ornaments that kind of represent the city that you're building, whether it's Paris or London or Kazakhstan. That's not a city. That's actually just a country. And Between Two Cities, it's contained within itself, and it's a great experience. It's a quick experience. It's once everyone knows how to play the game, it's a 20-minute experience of frantic cooperation and figuring out what to draft, what not to draft, and you get this puzzle which is emerging as you're playing it, and it's becoming more clear and more visible as the game ends, and you're kind of understanding more what you need to pick and what you need to pass. Whereas in Quadropolis, you're never quite certain. You have these plans that you really desperately try to put together, and at the end they will either be dashed or they will succeed, and you will emerge a victor then. I think both of those games are great, and I would recommend either of them. But for me, Between Two Cities is not only the clear winner, but it is just a winner on its own, to be honest. It's such a fun experience that I would recommend anyone get this game, unless you, of course, you want to only play with two people, which it kind of has a variant for, but it doesn't work very well because at the core of the game you're building the city with two other players, so a minimum of three is needed, and Quadropolis doesn't really play that great with two anyway. You want to play it with 3 or 4 players. And that's it for the Midnight Meeple episode number 2. We're on the internet now. You can find us at Twitter. You just go to your local skip and ask for a guy called Danny, and he'll put you on a computer and he'll sort you out. Just don't drink any of the coffee. It's the water there is not very good. You can also find us at healthydietsforyoungmoms.com. That's a website that we're developed a keen friendship with. They really like us over there. I don't really know why, but yeah. And stay tuned for more Midnight Meeple to come later.